So if you're not having these, has anyone had that conversation?
Try to. Well, we don't have enough actual facts. Yeah, we know what's gonna happen, but, you know,
I mean,
can pay for some of theirs and else, then the seller wants to know, well, what if they don't, you know? What if one price is different from the other price? Do we have to pay the same amount for each client? I mean, it's just, they had so many questions I hate to give legal answers to until we know. I heard an attorney say all fees, all the seller's compensation for the buyer has to be the same. And then the other day we said, no, it didn't have to be the same. It could be different. So
Yeah.
you don't want to say the wrong thing and try to do what's right.
If you're listing a property, you're gonna have a listing agreement, and these forms and documents are still coming forth. Not everything is set in stone, right? Okay, so this is still a moving target. I haven't seen all the forms. In fact, Kimberly Sherrod, she's licensed in Florida, and she showed me what Florida is doing, and they're pretty advanced in all this. They're way ahead of the curve than we are. And so all these forms have not been set in stone, but I expect that a listing agreement is going to have a compensation factor for you, the listing agent, and then for the listing brokerage. You're going to talk to your client about how much you plan on, if you choose to plan on, compensating the buyer broker. And then what if you're a dual agent? Still, dual agency is a play in our industry. They probably are looking at dual agency, and they may end up getting rid of it. Who knows in the future? But right now it's still a play. So in the listing agreement, you're going to have 3 different numbers: what you get paid, what the broker buyer agent gets paid, and then if you're a dual agent, what that number may look like.
Mark, when is that gonna happen? That form, so.
That
for
form?
Listing.
Well, August 17th is the last time you're gonna see compensation in the MLS. I know we're moving forward. Some brokers have already implemented that policy in their listing. They already show 0. I think many of you have already seen that. And so as we move forward, I'm expecting it sometime in August.
Okay.
That form's gonna have to come out.
Are we targeting to do something, or are we writing, or are we going off of what Columbus?
No, we're gonna go with the Columbus Realtors forms that they bring out. We are looking at having an attorney review some documents we're looking at to make sure that they're compliant and legal, and we're not going to be getting, and this all has to do with compensation.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at that, and those documents, like I said, this is a moving target, and this wheel's rolling right now.
Hey, Mark, is the compensation, you mentioned 3 different numbers, so buyer or listing agent compensation, buyer's agent compensation, and dual agency. Is the total still going to the listing broker to be shared with the buyer's agent's broker? Or are these gonna be checks that are sent to 2 different companies based on representation?
So you've listed the property, and the seller says, I'm going to pay you X. I'm willing to pay the buyer Y. I'm not going to pay him X, but I'll pay him Y. Right? So that's an agreement between you, the listing agent, and the buyer. Now the complication comes is that it's not posted anywhere. Nobody knows where it's going to be. The rules is you won't find it on the MLS. You won't put it in showing time because that's affiliated with the MLS. So any type of service that's affiliated with the MLS, you can't do it. So you might have it on Facebook. Your sign writers will probably say, we'll co-op. You know, maybe your sign writer will say, we'll not co-op. Who knows? Depends on how bold you are. But at the end of the day, you may have to make a phone call, because when you're writing your offer, what happens? You have a buyer's agency agreement that we're going to go through here. And it says that you, the buyer, are going to pay me X. And yet the seller is going to pay me Y, which might be less than X. So then, do you know that? And so do I have to make a phone call? So as you're going through your showing process and you finally end up probably, you might end up showing 10 homes. And you might narrow it down to 2 homes to write an offer on, so you might have to call that agent, those 2 agents to find out if any compensation will be offered. Or you just write the offer and say this offer will be. I've heard it both ways also. You don't negotiate commission in the contract, and you do negotiate commission in the contract. So my premise is if I have you, if you're my client, you're my buyer. And I have a contract with you that you're gonna pay me X. And you're gonna be held responsible for X because that's a legal document. Then you are giving me permission to negotiate with that seller of how these terms are coming back and forth. So if you're gonna pay me X and I find out you're Y, then I'm gonna come back to you and say, are you willing to give me that difference?
Right, getting
What?
back to Bill's question though.
Go ahead.
The seller's gonna pay, sorry, for those of us that have done this forever, this is really different.
No kidding.
Come on. Do I have you beat?
What's that?
Do I have you beat years wise? Maybe age wise, huh? Question is, you are the seller. I am the listing broker. You are willing to pay 4%, 3%, and 1%. Do you still pay the 4% to Keller Williams and then we pay the buyer brokerage, or is it 3 and 1?
Well, there's all sorts of, I look at Bill because Bill's the lender here. He wants to know this, he wants to know this too. So at the end of the day, it'll probably be a document that will say, here is the compensation differences in this agreement. I'm going to send the title company my portion of the agreed upon compensation. That means my buyer signed something that says I'll pay you this much, or that in the contract that says you'll pay me X% and you'll pay me Y%. So that'll be in the that'll have to go to the settlement statement. Or it might be paid outside of closing. See all the moving parts? It may not be. It's not gonna be like it's used to be.
It may be paid outside of closing.
So if I'm gonna pay you, Cindy, the difference of Y, I'm gonna write Keller Williams Greater Columbus a check, say, here's my difference. This is what I owe you. And then it goes to the broker, and then the broker does the split compensation.
And then when the buyer signed the document saying they would compensate us, they get to closing and they say, I don't have funds for you. Then what?
Doesn't close.
No, it's closed, but they said that they would compensate us, right? Maybe it's 1%, maybe it's 2%. At the end of the day, they close, they have their house.
Now, we'll go over that.
Fees. What happens to our commission? What if they say, I don't have it?
Well, here's the thing, there's outside of your buyer being your best friend, who's really your best friend? The banker. Because the banker's gonna tell you, here's their waiver, here's the difference they can cover. Some people have cash on hand, some people are tight to the bone.
And they cannot, put that commission into the amount they're borrowing for the house.
Correct.
So they have to.
Current. I mean,
Yeah.
who knows
Yeah.
what may come down the road? One of the things I've talked about in previous meetings is mortgages are really like investments, like you're buying a stock in IBM or Apple, right? So they take these mortgages, they pull them into millions or billions of dollars and they sell them as securities on basically the market, right? Right now, the way that works is your interest rate is one of the factors that it's based on is your loan to value. And your loan to value with a VA or a USDA loan can be 100%. Conventional loans can be 3% down or 97, but that's it, right? So what we used to call subprime, there's all these non-QM products out there. You guys are probably aware of them, DSCR, bank statement loans, 1099 loans. What has happened is they've created a new product, but for that product,
you're gonna have different requirements. So if you're doing a bank statement loan versus a full documentation loan with Fannie or Freddie, you may be required 10 or 20% down, and the interest rate's higher. It's all based on risk, reward, and what's the desired return on the investment. So could there be products that come about because of this change? Yes. By August 17th? No. So what we're going to have is what we have today. I was speaking with Linda on our way in. One of the things, and when Mark says your banker's gonna be your best friend, one of the things that I think is going to happen, and I even have a presentation to show buyers this, is option one is you're putting 5% down on a conventional loan at the list price. Option two is the seller has decided not to compensate your agent, so now you have to offer Y over list, and here's your adjusted numbers for down payment, blah, blah, blah. Option three is they're not paying anything. They're not willing to negotiate to pay your buyer's agent anything. So now what do we have to do? We may have to reduce your down payment from 5% to 3%, the minimum. That gives you guys at least 2% to work with on the Alta. And the terms are gonna change, right? Your mortgage insurance now went from 120 to 160 because your loan to value changed. So those are the conversations. And then I will be honest with you. I'm starting to talk to buyers about this because let's be honest, buyers jumping into the market today may not be able to successfully win a contract by August 17th. Or even July 1st, when Keller is gonna require the buyer's agency agreement. And some buyers are simply like, well, if the seller is not gonna pay and I don't have the money, I'm just not gonna look at those properties. So conversations are definitely gonna change, ones that I'm having, and certainly ones that you guys are gonna be having with listing agents or with seller and buyer.
Yep. What we're gonna end up doing is, first step is you have to sell your value proposition in order for get a buyer to sign the buyer's agency agreement. You're gonna tell them all the wonderful things you do and how you understand the purchase agreement and how you're able to successfully go through a transaction to protect their interests and go to closing. And that means I have a relationship with the bank, I have the title and all that. But part of that is they're gonna say, I'm gonna pay you. But again, it's a negotiable tax, so now we have to learn how to negotiate the difference or at all what our compensation is going to be. So we'll probably have to have classes on forms of negotiation. But we also talk about playing the long game. What's the long game? The long game is, I think I might know where you're going with this. The long game is if I owe you, let's just say $15,000 commission, but I can only give you 8. What's your long game? Are you gonna fight for the difference? Are you gonna fight for that $7,000? 8 and 7?
Yeah.
That's good. Okay. I'm good. My math is so good. Are you gonna fight for the, long game? Or, are you gonna give up that difference? Because you might have repeat business. How many of us have sold a house to a client more than twice? 3 times. What is your long game? If I'm willing to give up a few $1,000s today, am I gonna recuperate that in the future? So you have to think the whole thing. Now, keep in mind, Keller Williams Greater Columbus never set in stone a commission to offer somebody. It's always been our model to, it's your business, you negotiate for your business. We have a capping structure here. The more money you make, the sooner you cap, that whole theory works out real well. So as a brokerage, we do not tell you what what you have to offer. In the old days, some brokers said, if you didn't bring in this amount, you owed me at closing. And so, but we don't do that. But go ahead, what is it?
Well, my question is, let's assume you're showing that your buyer says, I have 5 houses I'd like. That doesn't happen as much as it used to, because inventory so low. And do you kind of need to know what the seller is offering? Because maybe your buyer broker agreement says, I can only afford to pay you 1%. Hopefully the seller can pay you at least 1%. But if that seller says, hey, I don't care about the buyer, let them worry about their commission to their buyer. Now you're only going to get 1%. And so Might it be wise to let the buyers know? That means you have to make, every time you show a house, you need to call the agent to say, what commission is your seller willing to pay? So I can alert my buyer.
You told the buyer by signing 1% contract, they will work 1%.
Probably, I mean, if you're gonna show 10 homes, I'm not calling 10 buyers because I know that my buyer's not gonna buy 10 homes. He's gonna buy one home. So if we show 10 homes and we end up saying, this is the one I like, that's the agent I'm gonna call.
You know, Mark, if you sign this thing at 1%, you're telling this client you're gonna work 1%.
Yes. Oh, is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah.
Well, be careful on this.
Well, and what if they say, no, the seller has to pay, I can't afford to pay you, and, because a lot of young buyers can't,
They don't have the money.
they don't have the cash besides their down payment and closing costs to.
There you go.
Right there. You gotta know when to walk. Why are you buying a home? All right, I mean. That question, I'm gonna have a hard time defending now. There's 1,000 reasons. But I can't work for free. And if your intention is for me to work with you for 3 months, knowing that I'm doing this because I like you. I mean, I can like you and still stay at home. Right? So you have to know what's your business model going to be like. And the thing is, in our industry, we license people. Like I can't tell you how quickly licensees come in. To the industry, not just to Keller, Williamsburg, Columbus or whatever, but to Columbus Board of Realtors, how quickly licensees come in. The harder our business got, the more licensees joined Keller or Columbus Realtors. Couldn't figure it out. But what was happening is that a lot of these agents are out of the business because they weren't making any money. And they create their business plan. The survivors in our business today will come right back up here. So you understand your value and of cooperative compensation. Now that means you have to tell me as the listing agent, why are you so good? Like, I'll use Paul. If Paul's gonna write me an offer and I'm gonna go, I know for sure this deal's going to good. We're gonna close this deal. But there are some agents out there I might know, I may not really know them, or maybe I don't want to know them. That I might say, oh, this deal is gonna be hard to close. This will be just nothing but a difficult transaction. So, you know, your value proposition is get to know everybody that's in the business. You know, get to know the top producers at least. There's 2,000, right? 20% of 10?
One of the things that I've learned is that the new people that are getting into business and the life cycle is you work with buyers. And the reason is because they never had to explain their value because the seller's gonna pay me, so I don't need to tell you what I'm gonna do, it's gonna get to the house. And I think that's where we have to learn now to, just like we do on listing points, we gotta explain our value, we can do that. But buyers agents never had to do that, because they always saw that money's in there, so they never had to explain, they just did it. And now I think that's why it's really tough for this to happen, to have that conversation.
I agree.
I also think you guys, specifically addressing your questions, is it's gonna be even more critical for you to have a lender that you trust and have this conversation up front. Because, for example, if, you know, a buyer were to come and they're looking at a $300,000 house and they only have $50,000 to work with, right? If they need to compensate you, and I know Mark gets mad when we talk about numbers, but if they need to compensate you 9,000, that's $6,000 is not enough for down payment closing costs. However, what if you look at a down payment assistance program? What if you bought a property in a rural area that they qualify for 100% financing USDA? Like you're really just gonna have to have those conversations and have somebody that's a strong enough partner with you to explain and help you sell your value to the buyers, but also show them the solution to the problem. Because I mean, I'll be honest with you, I have a client right now that got over the weekend that was pre-approved by Huntington Bank for a price that wouldn't even allow her to have a 3% down payment and closing costs, yet alone cover the buyer's agency compensation. So we literally had to pivot to an assistance program, take the money she had and said, okay, if you don't find a house or you find one that's not going to,
you need your money for that, but we can cover everything else in there, so. But
It's an open line of communication with all people involved with the transaction, not just the buyer. If you're, communicate clearly and often, we'll avoid misunderstandings. That doesn't mean I'm just communicating with you, the buyer. I'm communicating with the title company, I'm communicating with the banker, I'm communicating with the home inspector. I'm gonna have to really step up my game. How many of you have a listing presentation? How many pages is it? Just throw a number. in.
14.
How many?
14.
14? How many of you have a buyer's presentation? How many pages is it? 6. Okay, it better be longer than this. It better be longer than this, okay? Because a lot of people are gonna, I'm gonna come up to you and say, oh, by the way, we gotta sign a buyer's agency agreement, this, blah, blah, blah. Most people don't explain the purchase agreement to the buyer. Let alone explain all the paragraphs in here. So communication, this is the problem we have, is communication clear and often will prevent these type of issues. And you build that relationship. Let's move on. Is this a true statement? Yes.
Yeah.
So, articulate your value. And that, like Paul was saying, the new people, they don't know what their value is. All they know is that boom, the sign goes in the yard and you're in contract in 24 hours. I didn't even have time to think about my value, let alone write it down on paper, and I'm in contract. And I've never written a contract before, and so not all ages are created equal. Now, one of the things you're gonna see in this room is that the most senior of us all are probably have the best value to offer. Because we've already gone through these roads of hard knocks. We've already lost as much as we've earned, probably. Maybe not Paul, but some of us have. Paul doesn't lose a dime. No. But so articulate your value. You need to know how that looks and then say, come with confidence. And again, I just said, the older guys in the room, girls in the room, I mean, we've done it so much that we come across with a lot more confidence than the newbie. But with AI and some of the technology, you see some of these young agents knocking it way out of the park. They're selling 100, 200 homes in 2 years in the business. They learn real quick. They come with experience. And their experience is different than my experience. Develop your ability to negotiate. We'll probably have to have classes on negotiation, terms and conditions. How do we write that down? These are probably future classes we're going to have. And part of it is in negotiating, again, knowing your lender, knowing the financial terms and condition in today's financial world is going to help save deals. So understand negotiating skills in real estate. So on the buying side, we have the buying side here. We've already talked about it. Again, there's probably a reason why I'm reiterating it in every slide. What is your value proposition? Because you really need to know. Highlight the benefits of a written agreement. The written agreement is not just this buyer's agency agreement that will be required July 1. The written agreement is the contract itself. So you have to tell them the value between why you're working with me to here, so you can get to here. The purchase agreement. So there is a value because, I mean, what do we do to get these things to the closing table? We have to negotiate. We have to talk with the lender. We do talk with the home inspectors. We have to negotiate terms and condition. We have to deal with all sorts of pluses and minuses in the contract writing. So understand the value of it is to talk to them about your life experiences in dealing with contract writing. All right, so again, this is part of the buying side. And Again, you are having the buyer's agency agreement before you show a home. Whether it's a home you write on or not write on, you have the agreement signed before. And then. And here it's, what they were telling us is that if the listing agent is not gonna compensate you on this particular listing, you have to let your buying client know. Because then they have to make a decision, are you okay compensate, you have to advise them, are you okay paying me the difference? Or would you like me to negotiate that on behalf, this contract at this value reflects compensation, I don't know the legal part of all that, we're still working on it. So you have to. So if you finally find 10 homes and, to me, if you're, call that agent, the agent says, no, I couldn't get my seller to pay any part of the buyer's commission, then you have to call your client and say, they're not gonna pay any commission. Are you okay with it? So,
not-
it's, again, this is gonna be a tough couple months coming before the end of the year. We're gonna be ironing out a lot of things. And I've changed my phone. Educate the why, here's the thing, we never educated them. But you guys come across professional. I mean, attorneys charge for their fees. Everyone charges, nobody works for free. You go to a restaurant, you don't eat for free. I mean, you pay at the end, we get paid at the end. I mean, if you do something, you should be compensated for it and understand the value that you bring to the table. Educate your buyers. Again, that's a high level of communication. Do you see the reasons why that I bring value to you as a buyer's representative as we go through this series of homes? And are you able to communicate that with your clients? So we're going to need to keep practicing. And again, on the selling side, if you're a listing agent, you have to do the same thing. You have to advise the benefits of cooperation. So, I want to tell you the value behind a buyer's agent. I don't want to pay a buyer's agent. Well, then maybe I didn't do a good enough job. Maybe that's your response. If a seller says, I'm not going to pay a buyer's agent, and they say, oh, I'm really sorry. Maybe I didn't do a good enough job explaining to you the value that a buyer brings to the table. Let me go over this one more time. And I want to express to you the value that a buyer's agent does bring to the table. Okay. Again, you're explaining compensation is negotiable and it's in writing. It has to be in writing. There's no handshake deals in real estate. Explain how compensation can increase the buyer pool. So. Some buyers will say, well, they're not going to pay you, then let's not go look at the house.
So you have a seller sitting there and the seller says, if I get a low ball offer, I don't want to compensate the agent, but if I get what you're asking, I want to compensate it. We have to have this ahead of time, whatever we're going to compensate a buyer's agency.
Well, you know what?
Because again, if somebody, you get multiple offers and you get, $50,000 over the list and the seller says, yeah, I'll be happy to pay whatever. But if I get below this, I'm not gonna pay. But we have to have this negotiated up front with the seller.
Well. Are you talking about talking to the listing, the seller?
So
Keep in mind. That, okay, we just had that conversation, Paul, I'll tell you what, if we're between 325 and 350, I'm willing to pay a buyer's agent for compensation. Anything below that, then maybe we're not gonna pay. So, but you're gonna have a listing agreement. It's gonna go back to the old school. And if you don't like it below 325, then why don't we negotiate and keep it at 325 to 350? Why, we don't need to go below your minimum. If I'm gonna lowball, how many times you get a lowball offer on your listings? You accept them? Or you throw them out the door?
that's all.
Well,
Years, that type of thing. So
But sometimes, I do understand that sometimes the sellers just get rid of it.
Yeah.
You know, it's a low ball, let's get rid of it. But again, it's a negotiable item. Nothing's the same no more.
So it
We're looking
doesn't,
for a concrete answer, and this
Well,
this
I think
this ball keeps moving like this.
Listing agreement, your listing agreement is going to specify what you're going to do the compensation, the buy side of the contract.
Can we amend that listing agreement depending on the offer that we get? To the buyer's compensation?
Yeah, you'd have to. What?
Well, that's what I'm saying, we gotta amend the listing agreement if they say,
Are
hey,
you gonna?
and we're only gonna offer.
From this price,
Zero.
this price, I'll pay this percent,
buyer's
from this
agent.
price, from this price, I'll pay zero. And then when a buyer's agent calls you, are you offering compensation? Is that what you tell them?
We will know it's negotiable, is all we can say, right?
What you say, what your client tells you, say, if your seller says, yeah, you can tell them you want to, tell whatever you want, sell the house, you can tell them.
Couldn't you also?
I mean, I could almost see something like, I mean, you're gonna have to do this for you too. If you know, you're thinking about them defending the buyer's agent compensation, you have to defend yours. So if I want X and, you know, for 3%, let's say again, we don't use numbers here. But the fake number of 3, for me as a listing agent, and we're gonna have a variable rate commission for the buyer's agent. I mean, I'm just thinking this up right now, Paul. So if we get between my 325 and 350, I'll give the buyer's agent 2.5%. If we get below 325 to 315, I'll go down to 2%. Maybe you have a variable rate commission for, depending on the offer that you get.
We gotta think that through and make sure that's allowed, because I can see that coming.
Yeah.
Remember, they said you can't, remember, they said now on the ruling and stuff, you can't do additional compensation. So that could be fall within the, so it was saying paying, seller's agent paying the agent an extra $2,000, that I heard was gone also too, it's crossed,
Yeah.
so there's ways we're doing, but now, I think one of the person I had spoken to, the real estate attorney said, if I'm writing a contract, the contract that I'm writing has to detail the compensation that is expected, that was discussed, so it's agreed upon and that all parties have signed.
in the contract,
Yeah, all parties got to.
Well, let's say you write a buyer's agreement that says, I'll pay you $15,000 just to represent me on any of my buy. And you go to a contract that compensation from the listing side is more than $15,000. You can't collect over the $15,000.
You can't collect over 50.
No, that's why I said that.
Yeah.
And that's why he said there's stipulations on,
Yeah.
based on whatever, but again, like I said, what are we willing to take?
Again, you're gonna play the long, I'm gonna take the buyer's agency agreement, and most likely I'm going to do my best to get that X, that 3%, right? But I'm playing the long game too. Is that what happens if the deal comes in and I can only pull 2% out of this to make it work, and the buyer doesn't have that money? Am I gonna say, well, you owe me 1%? Am I gonna play the long game?
You take a check and you go on to the next deal.
I can take less, but I can take more.
100%.
So if you come in and say, well, then I'll do 2%, why don't you negotiate your value again and say, why don't we go 3 and I'll work with you on what the buyer has to say? Because we don't know what the buyer has to say. You might be good enough to negotiate that extra point out of the seller. This is a moving target. We're gonna have to have classes on how to structure contracts like this.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I can see contracts coming in now saying, okay, the buyer's agent knows that the buyer's gonna pay them $9,000. You have a $300,000 house. I'm gonna put it in the contract, seller to compensate buyer's agency 9,000. They counter it out of there. Now the buyer's liable for that and they can negotiate that on top of that. We can go in at, the house is listed at 300. We're gonna go in at 310. We're gonna ask them to pay the fee that you would agree to pay us. We get it that way. So we see it that way. Then the appraiser comes in. He did.
Yeah.
and the appraisal was cut, and then.
Yeah, and they come back to square one. That's what I said.
But the bottom line here is explaining the compensation. Again, we're defending ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to explain our defense to our clients. You know, so this is a good conversation to have with your client. Why you want to offer compensation because it does increase the buy and hold. If you hold off, because you're not offering compensation and we accept an offer that's $20,000 less than list price and you hold on to the property for 3 more months and your mortgage payment is $3,000 a month, that just costs you $9,000. Well, you know, there's a mathematical formula in here that says this makes sense to do it today, then reject that offer and then continue to pay your mortgage payment and pay that mortgage. I mean, $400,000 house, $500,000, you're gonna have a
It's
$3,000.
hard to sell to a seller and say, listen, you could potentially harm your ability to sell a house by not offering. So you, I said.
That'll be easier, probably.
Yeah. I don't think it's hard to sell. Personally.
So this is what you're talking about here, guys. Right here. So now you have to educate you have to educate the seller on the buyer's ability or their inability to finance this compensation. When they're not financing. We already know that.
Well,
But they have to figure out a way that's gonna come up with that money. Right? We have to figure out. So this is the conversation you're having with your seller. You have to tell them. You know, here already the seller or the buyer's coming to the table with 20% down on a $500,000, that's $30,000. $150,000. And so they're gonna have to, now you're asking them to come up with another. Yeah, another 15 grand.
Plus their closing costs.
And they're gonna be, some of your clients are gonna go, yep, that's right. They want my house, that's what they're gonna do. You know that. So again, let me go back over. So let's do this now. Let's go over this agreement. We get that look there. I'm gonna copy that.
Oh, you got Mark, one quick question. So the appointment of agent form is there, are they gonna strike that out of our forms? Because again, the appointment of agent, if you're doing an appointment of agents, some people, some of the buyers they were doing an appointment of agent. You know, if they were showing a house, they said, I hereby file an agent, you can show whatever house, but is that gone? We're not able to use that because again, it won't be.
When you sign your consumer guide or you sign a retained agreement, stuff like that.
Yeah, but I'm talking about like if people were using the appointment of agent when they're doing shows.
Yeah,
So the exclusive right is what they can use. They can't use it. Somebody had some, and I said, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
You can't.
if you're on a team.
But that just shows you what the.
So when you're on a team, whether you're 3 people or 30 people, if you take a listing, in our company, all team members represent your client.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine them getting rid of the appointment of showing, if you and I are teaming up on a group that you're not available, I'm going to go show.
So for the team that okay. Got it.
Yeah. All right. As all contracts, you have a beginning and end. And you want to explain the terms of that beginning and end. It could be extended if it's in writing, but it also could be canceled prior to the end of the term by either party within 7 days of written notice. So if you sign this today, and then, you know, I really don't like the way you showed up, you weren't prepared, you didn't do this, and I'm thinking, you know, maybe I'm gonna find somebody else. They have a right to terminate it. In writing, within that 7-day period of time. This is why you want your value proposition here, not down here. So this agreement, the change in this agreement is that now either or party may terminate it. If the client terminates this agreement prior to the expiration of the term or extension thereof, the client shall still owe compensation to the broker. So if you come back into here, you're gonna have a protection period. So if I showed you 10 homes, I'm gonna say, well, I know you like this home here and there, and I want you to know that I wanna be protected in this. Here's my writing, I'm gonna write you a letter that I showed you this date on this home. And these are the homes that you express interest in. If you write with Paul, then I'm gonna be due a commission. You know, again, that's a big fight. These are fights. I don't know about that. So if you're showing properties and it just so happens that the contract gets terminated. And you feel that you maybe were not used properly, maybe they found their cousin was a realtor and wanted to use them. You want to write down the houses that you showed them. And that you want to advise them that I am protected on these things. If you're interested in these properties, I'll follow up with you and we could write the contract.
Yeah, because I can see a buyer submitting an offer, asking for compensation, the seller says absolutely not. Then the buyer says, okay, I don't want to pay it, so I'm gonna cancel the agreement, then I'm gonna go back to that seller on my own. Later,
So that, it's all based on time.
it is based on.
So what, and not house shows, not contract. So what would be the recommended time? Let's say we're at 9 days listing
For
agreement.
the protection period.
For the protection period, X number of days,
Yeah, what was it, 30 days?
732 years.
Infinity, right?
No.
But I think that's.
Well, you also want to find out if your client has a sense of humor. But the client shall still owe a compensation to the broker. Consistent to the agreement of the section, okay, now here's the understanding, is that this is just the first paragraph. If you're not explaining this to them. And they terminate the agreement. They have no idea that this paragraph is even in here. You didn't really go through the meat of this contract. So you need to, that's why you have to really be clear, let me explain to you what this, after you read it to them, you should, you want to explain it to them. I read it to you, let me explain what this really means. Again, it comes back down to communication. With the broker's obligation to the client. Now. Again, some of you said you had a listing or a buyer's representation agreement that might be 10 pages long. Again, the buyer's obligation to the client is paragraph 1.1 and paragraph 1.2. Not very long. So you better have a different value proposition than what's written in here. The broker shall assist the client through the transaction through closing. That doesn't really say that much, does it? And the broker shall act in the client's best interest. If the client is terminating the agreement for the previous paragraph, were you working in the client's best interest for them to get to that point to terminate the agreement? Again, we have to raise our bar for professionals. Clients understand that the broker may be working with more than one client at a given time and is not responsible, is not prohibited from representing other clients with regard to any residential real estate property. What is that called? That's actually called contemporaneous offers. So if I'm showing you the house and I show you the same house and she jumps the gun, I'm writing the offer with her. Get on the ball.
Mark, don't you have an obligation to tell the other client that
Yes,
you're writing the offer?
So, I just told you when I read it to you. So I may be working with other clients, and if we do work with other clients, I want to let you know that they may too like the same house that you like, and they may want to write an offer.
Right,
In the event that that happens, I will give you a notification that my client is writing. Now, if you read the contemporaneous offer, there's another document in our book that is contemporaneous offer. You read it, it says you give notification. The client's obligation to the broker. They're not gonna remember this either. The client shall work exclusively with the broker for the acquisition of the residential real property and will immediately identify themselves as a client of the broker at any time when communicating with or viewing residential property, such as but not limited to attending an open house, visiting builder's model home or construction site, taken for sale by owners, or any other brokerage. Okay, so if you're, again, if you need to have a conversation with your client, so I can't be with you 100% of the time, but I'm there for you. In the event you go to an open house, you know, you have to let the other agent know you're working with. When they say, hello, how are you? You go, you know, I'm really good. I want to let you know, I'm working with Paul George, and he'll be my broker, he'll be my agent representative. So have that conversation with your client. Let them know that you are represented. Now in here, it says builder. A lot of builders today builders don't follow Columbus Realtor. A lot of builders today will say, you have to be there when you walk through the threshold, or if I register your client, or my client and not yours. So if your client has an expressed interest in building, then maybe you have to go out of your way and make sure, okay, well, why don't we on Saturday or Sunday, let's spend the whole day looking at homes. Let's get you registered in every builder, you know, call them, just say, I'm bringing Sally Sue by. At this time, you know, just get them registered yourself.
Except. Got this agreement that says you're being paid a certain amount, no matter what they buy. Builder or.
The builder don't care with this. They don't care with it.
But it's between the buyer and me.
Correct.
So.
But then a person recourse with that you fire.
So-
You don't have recourse with the builder.
You read it, because this agreement is between you and the buyer. This is why you want to have that heart-to-heart conversation, that some builders will not respect this contract. And therefore, if you are interested in seeing these new builds, you let me know, and we will specifically get you registered through me. And the reason for that is, we have an agreement that you're gonna pay me X amount of dollars for this agreement, and that if the builder takes you away from me, do you not still owe me that money? So I want to protect your interest financially. Right? Isn't that what you want to do? I don't want you to double dip on this thing. Builder's not going to credit you. And that's the conversation you might want to have. You know, the builders maybe won't respect this agreement. But again, this agreement says, I'm working with you and you're working with me, and you're going to allow me to register you with the builder. The client shall cooperate with the broker and located both properties. Cooperation includes open communication, reasonable availability, and provide true and accurate personal financial information to the broker, which broker agrees to keep confidential at all times unless the clients specifically authorize disclosure. So again, you're getting financial information. There's nothing different in here. You have the consumer guide, you have fiduciary duty of confidentiality. All that is being said anyway. And then here comes your next deal. This is one everyone swallows really hard. Compensation of the broker. Now, what is your fee? I mean, it could be, you could discuss a percentage, you could discuss a flat fee, you could discuss a variable fee. But what is your fee? If I'm buying $1 million home, is it different than when I buy a $300,000? Will I do a flat fee on an upper end home and a percentage on a smaller home? You know, what does your business model look like? How do you sell yourself? Then you have to have it in writing. Again, it reiterates that brokers' compensation, the broker's commission are not set by law and are fully negotiable. So, and we've talked about that, our fees are not set. These are business models that you have to be comfortable with creating yourself and be able to negotiate that with your client.
Mark, I have an easy, I
Cindy?
hope it's easy question. Okay, my buyer is willing to pay 2% commission on a house. Okay, buyer brokerage fee. The seller says we're gonna pay 2% commission, buyer brokerage fee. What do we do? Do we tear this up? What happens to this form?
No, never check.
But is it no longer in effect?
No, you still need it. Because you haven't gone to closing yet.
I'm just, okay,
So
if the buyer buys that house and they're in contract with the seller paying a 2% commission,
if it's in the contract, when the title receipt, the the title company will receive the contract and they will prepare the settlement statement. If it's in the contract that says 2%, then it will be on the settlement statement.
On
If
which
it's
side?
outside of the settlement statement, huh?
On which side?
So,
Yeah.
Well,
understand your question.
it's on the seller side, because the seller agreed to pay for it.
But
But-
it's not in the contract, if,
It's-
for us, if it's not in the contract, then we're still they're still obligated to this. So do we turn this over to the title?
No, you're
company?
not double dipping. If the
That's-
seller's gonna pay you, then this contract has been satisfied.
Yes. They owe you 2% no matter how to get it.
You can't get 2% from the seller and 2% from,
That's what I'm trying to make sure that.
yeah.
But in the contract, it does say any compensation paid by the seller or seller's broker to, the broker should be credited towards the client's obligation. So whatever the client's obligation is, it's saying that that's the basis.
Just what I was gonna say, I don't know if the title company is going to treat a line that shows that the buyer is actually paying the buyer's agency agreement on there, but the seller's giving a credit on a different line.
They do that now.
They do it now, but
are they
we've
gonna
never had where a buyer's
pay
debited to the agency, buyer's agency.
We have, but it's very rare.
It's very.
And what they do is, you know, a lot of times they'll call you and say. If there's no seller compensation, they'll usually call the agent and say, you know, what's going on here. In all honesty, my firm opinion is to spell it out in the contract, in the purchase contract.
But even if you still have a contract.
Seller
you
to
still
pay
have
or
to
buyer
have
to
a
pay.
piece of paper saying that it's going, you're paying that brokerage.
The
The buyer's agency agreement says that you're paying that, and I'm saying to satisfy that as well, it should be a debit to the buyer, even though you're gonna get a credit from the seller. Just calling it something different.
If the compensation is received by the broker from the seller, the seller's broker under section 3.1 is equal to the client payment obligation under this agreement, the client's obligation to the broker shall be deemed satisfied.
That's it right there.
So it's there.
That's what-
It's there.
And if the buyer, if the seller offers zero compensation and the buyer is to pay the buyer's broker, how will that be defined, or will it be defined in the settlement statement? Are they bringing a check?
If you write it in the purchase contract, which is what I recommend you do,
Okay,
yes, and they will bring a check at closing and everything has to match and balance at closing that
will
way.
be on the settlement statement.
When we had Joe Baroni in here, that's what he said.
And I
They,
think he was still trying to figure it out.
they would like to
too.
see, and then when I asked the Scott, whatever his last name is, at the state, that's our state attorney.
Right, check.
No, at the state level, no they are. And he said, yeah, it needs to be in the purchase contract spelled out so that there's no question.
So the seller shall pay Keller Williams Greater Columbus Realty 2%. And shall be paid upon successful closing, or the buyer shall pay Keller Williams Greater Columbus Realty 2% paid upon success. And then there will be a line item on the seller's, on the buyer side, whatever that 2% might be, and they'll be down at the bottom, and then they'll ACH it over.
Is the CBA contract gonna change at all?
I haven't seen it all.
But is there one in the works? that-
Yeah, well, from what I understand,
Listing contract is changing. I don't know about the purchase contract as of yet, anyway.
yeah, I don't know about that.
I would love the purchase contract to have a paragraph, just like you do on,
Yeah.
Commercial.
on commercial or even on.
That-
Like the home warranty. I mean, it's still in the
I
blank.
agree,
If you can put a fill in the blank, that kind of brings it out in the open to
and
everybody.
it makes it
Exactly.
less room for error.
That would make this whole conversation
And
so
no,
much easier.
it would.
Yeah, but we've talked about the same thing. Actually, when Scott was here last week, we mentioned, I mean, so much easier on the commercial side. You just drop a number in there, flat fee percentage, whatever. It says who's gonna get what. And it's right there in the purchase contract. So when the title company gets the contract, they read it and they know how distribution's gonna be.
And I assume if there's, the title company now needs the buyer's agency agreement too,
Yes,
so.
that may be the case.
Yeah.
So
You're asking for that.
a lot of times on the commercial side, I have to prepare an invoice to get paid. Go, how much you getting paid, Mark? I go, well, shoot, send me over an invoice. But, you know, instead of, I can't just say I'm getting paid, X amount of dollars for the sale. I have to show them in writing, so it's a documented thing. Because then all parties see it too. Well, at least my client side see it. Protection period, do not leave that blank. Explain it to them that after, if I'm going through my my fiduciary duty and I'm showing you all these homes and this contract terminates, you want to write out a list of the properties that they maybe have expressed high interest in and protect yourself. And we still need the agency disclosure and company policy on agency. There's no difference that's going to go on there. If you're on the team, you better have your team agreement in case your team members are going to be part of the showing party. So that your clients know that I'm part of the team or you're part of the team and showing the party. Again, inspections. It's just talking about, hey, I'm not an inspector, I'm just here for you. Professional advice, that's always been in contracts. Your client always has the right to obtain professional advice from attorneys to accountants, whatever. I'm not here to tell you any legal advice. If we do need it, you need to get an attorney. Accounting, go get yourself an accountant. Again, we talked a little bit earlier about contemporaneous offer. If I'm representing buyers and that's my threshold of business, I'm a buyer's agent on a team. And that's all I do is buyers, and contemporaneous offer is probably going to be a document you want to have in your portfolio. So just in case it comes up and I show that property to 2 or 3 of my clients and 2 out of the 3 want it, what's the deal? So you're gonna have to review the contemporaneous offer with the client. Fair housing has not gone away, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. Wire fraud, again, express the phishing scam. So on your compliance documents, you're going to have the phishing documents still in our dot loops. That doesn't eliminate that. You still have to explain the phishing. If there are any additional terms, maybe additional terms is that I'm working with a builder and the builder may offer a $5,000 buyer's agent bonus if you bring a contract to me and go into contract by the end of the month. So in here, you might want to say, if you know that's happening, is that the buyer understands that the builder may offer a bonus package to the buyer's brokerage up to $5,000. You can't leave it blank. So if they give you a $10,000 bonus, you can only take 5 of it. So if so maybe you call in, what's your bonus package?
So I can't say something to the effect of, we will split any bonus available. We have to actually put a number in there.
You're not splitting. Most builders won't allow you to do that.
Makes sense.
Dispute resolution. This is through mediation, arbitrators. This isn't the legal. It's not going through judge and jury. So you want to explain the dispute resolution and the if necessary, you can have the code of ethics in your back pocket. You can pull the booklet out, go to Article 17 and review what mediation is all about. Choice of law disagreement. So we're in Ohio, so we're subject to Ohio. This is the agreement, and the client acknowledges. Now, one of the things that they did talk about at the legal and legislative update is that there was a buyer's agent representing a buyer and a new build product. And they presented the offer, and I guess the buyer's agent said, that's just a standard builder contract. So she went ahead and signed it. And she moves in, and then the house starts to fall apart, starts shifting, cabinets falling, floors cracking, all sorts of things were going around. And so she ended up suing as many people as she could, and the buyer's broker was involved with it. And so when it went to court, under the court's finding is that because the buyer's agent had executed a buyer's agency agreement, a buyer's representative agreement that says you have the right to have legal counsel, that the court system deemed that the broker was not liable for any responsibility of that, and that because the buyer signed it is that it was their responsibility to go get an attorney and do that. It wasn't my responsibility or the buyer's agent responsibility to do that. So had it not been, I mean, that $100,000 could have been coming out of the E&O, out of your pocket, out of everybody's pocket in the brokerage. So this is, that story doesn't motivate you to get this signed. I think it should. E&O only covers so much, right? We have caps, we have minimums, we have deductibles, and we have to be responsible for it. There is, so if I do find out, let's just say, my buyer and I agree to that X percent of compensation, and we find out that the seller is willing to pay Y, you can come back and amend your agreement with the seller. If your buyer and client says, yeah, I think you're worth it, you're worth every penny, I appreciate all the work you've done. And if the seller's gonna pay for it, then go ahead and let's amend the agreement and adjust it from X to Y. So you can, huh?
Is Y larger?
Y is larger.
So you can use it.
So. Now, some people may say, no, I want to deduct from the purchase price, I don't know what the deal's gonna be. But if you don't know your value proposition, what I recommend is go through the purchase contract. There's 14 pages of value proposition that you need to protect your buyer from. So if, we have the finance, we talked a little bit with Bill about financing today. Attorney review clause, identifying property, subject matter. So you have to, your value proposition is right here. And all these things that we go through. And when we teach the purchase contract, the largest paragraph in here is the inspection paragraph 6. And it's like 3.5 pages long. So if that doesn't bring you value to the table, how you're going to protect your buyer's interest in reviewing the property inspection and all the required tests. Now you better know it. Rural property home inspections are different than subdivision inspection properties. In commercial work, there's we're working on a deal right now. I had to do a little homework on this. There's a CRA involvement on a commercial property. And the CRA has strict requirements in order to get the tax abatement. And part of the abatement was if you didn't have 98 or more employees in the building, then you lose your CRA, which is a big savings, like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on commercial property. And so in order to sell the property, we have to find a replacement that has the same number of employees, that brings in the same kind of revenue in order to maintain the CRA. Otherwise, somebody's gonna be left stuck holding on the real estate tax, right? So, and it does expire in a few more years, but nonetheless, it expires in 31, so that's still a good period of time. That's a lot of money to be ponying up over the next 5 years. So do your homework in the inspection part of things. So you have to be careful and understand what's going on. And the way you do that is call the economic development director and they tell me what's going on. They spill their guts every time. Hey, that's their job, right? Do you know the CRA? I go, well, what about the CRA out there? So he sends me over all the documents and I read them and I go, oh, that's pretty rough. So what we want to do is, again, you got to know your value proposition and everything we touch, say, and do in real estate is your value proposition. Your lifestyle is your value proposition. Don't be afraid to say that, part of my income is to pay for my livelihood. So don't be afraid to say that. Everyone knows you have to live. So don't be afraid to say that. So, what kind of questions do you have at this point?
So I have a question. If I'm the listing agent and since MLS will no longer allow to put the commission rate out there for everyone to know, what is your recommendation So we can no longer use the platform of MLS to show the 3%. Is there a legal platform that we can publish the 3% or whatever the commission offering is, so that I'm a listing agent and I don't want 30 agents calling me the same, and that's gonna happen. And a lot of agents don't answer their phones, as you know.
You can list on your website, can't you?
As long as it's not, yes, you can.
You get on your personal website, yes, you can.
As long as it's
Company
not an
website, you
IDX
can't.
feed from the MLS.
So your Facebook page,
Yeah.
you can, I can text you.
Some people were talking about putting it on their signs.
Yeah.
Or putting it on the material
That means
inside
you
the
have to drive
house,
past this, right?
Well, you
You
buyers
get in
club.
your car.
but, or on the flyer inside the house.
Can
Seller
you
offering extra percent.
remarks in MLS for
No.
PC website for,
You can,
You can
in
do that.
agent remarks, you can say, seller is offering compensation, but
but
you
you
can't say.
what, but you can, you say see compensation at www, or whatever your website, maybe where that house is listed.
That's unclear. When we were at that class with last week, they said that that's unclear because you can't have a link even that you can click on and show it from on MLS anywhere.
What if you just ask, like, please text me at this number for fire or for.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
you could do that.
I remember when we first got into business, there was a system where you could, like, if I had 123 Main Street, text, 1234 for information on 123 Main Street.
An
And
idea
I-
system.
I don't know if that's still around.
I've got it. You can text, I got it in my writer, you can text for information on this house and I can put anything I want in that.
There you go.
My old school.
I like
What the old school is that every day of the week I go to the area realtor meetings. I can get up and talk about my listings all the time, and now I can tell people that I know that are going to be selling the place. And there's lenders there, and then and they're gonna talk to other people, say, Old George is offering 3% on that listing over on Tension Road or wherever.
So
I think we need to get back and do that a little bit more.
Well, here's what I'm hoping. It's funny, I was on a Clubhouse call the other day. And a lot of, I'm not saying you guys, I'm just saying agents in general don't want to talk on the phone. And here's the thing, you're not representing your client well if you're not talking on the phone. Because if Carrie has a listing and I call her and I'll say, if I'm working in my buyer's best interest, I'm gonna ask her, what's most important to you? What are you looking for? I'm gonna communicate with her so that I don't go in and say 7 days, possession and they need 60. Or whatever the case is. So having that conversation, those conversations have always been important. Then just add, so are you offering your seller offering compensation? What is it? And then
What's the rule, Dale? You ask good questions,
you get, he who asks
you
good
get better
questions. in control.
results. Yeah, you get better answers.
Well, I think.
Because you don't have to, like Dale's absolutely right. Don't even start off with the commission conversation.
Yeah.
So what's your client looking for? Because I want that part of my contract. What's more valuable to you? Because at the end of the day, then, if I can provide all these things to you in a contract, is your seller going to be offering a compensation to me? I'm expecting 10%.
What's your seller's bottom line? Who says you can't
One
You
of
know.
the,
offer additional sales price in order to
let
make
me
it?
ask you this because of when listing agents know that they're gonna get multiple offers, they put an offer sheet or something in the document section. Saying this is what the seller is looking for.
Right.
They put that in the document. Can they put compensation in there?
No,
Because it's part of the MLS,
Correct.
even though it's on a document.
Correct.
Okay, good to know.
So
You're not saying yes to it, are you?
no, I said no.
Oh, okay, that's what I said. I go, boy, that's the first time in how many years you disagreed with me.
No, I said, he said, because it's MLS, I said, yes, that,
Okay.
we're on the same page.
Listen is not.
So it just says that, I understand what you're talking about there, but going back to one thing. The seller is offering 3% compensation to the buyer brokerage, okay? And this is signed, the buyer is gonna pay the buyer brokerage 2%, for example, okay, and it's up 2. And these people are paying 3. We go to closing. Does this have to be updated? Because the brokerage is getting more than the 2?
You can amend it, you can't be compensated more than what's signed on.
That's right.
So you
So
have to.
this has to be amended to meet the compensation the seller is gonna offer.
You have to have,
Amendment.
no, you have to have a new one or amend it.
And the, or
or except the 2%
Right.
from your buyer, from the seller.
They're obligated, you're only gonna pay what, so they're gonna pay more than what you're signing.
Even though the seller's willing to pay.
Correct.
Not be paid more than what's.
And here's the
So
other
when
one,
does this have to be signed? Before the contract is signed for the
Yeah.
higher amount?
Sure.
before you show a house.
Before you
So
show
you,
any,
this thing's gonna move all the time.
before you show any house.
Probably a better best practice is to take whatever your absolute want is in this agreement and then be willing to accept less.
But what you're saying, if they're gonna sign this contract, let's say 3 weeks after signing this contract, you find a house that your client wants to buy and they're willing to pay for something for the sign.
But then the seller's obligated.
You're not gonna sign a new. So you're gonna sign this contract before you show the first house, but you might show 12 houses before your client finds one they like. And that might be a scenario where that seller is willing to compensate you more than what you're obligated your contract to do. What do you do? You amend it, you write a new contract. So, but you've already shown the house.
But not before having a conversation, before you amend that, even with your buyer, because here's the thing, buyer might say, well, you agreed to work for 3 before they're offering 4, why aren't you giving me the extra percentage back to help me on my,
Right.
The buyers agree to do that.
so you gotta be really careful on that, and have conversations around.
They gotta like it.
And
I'll pay more money.
it's gonna get litigated. Somebody's gonna change their compensation up. Some seller is gonna contact one of the same damn attorneys that is sued and
That's right.
we'll just have a new round of this stuff.
I think the best practice probably is going to be once you whatever you agree to here, run with it, move on to the next. And
Well,
yourself a-
And the other thing with builders, especially, you're gonna have to have conversations, because a lot of times they'll offer bonuses or different things like that. So in the case of a builder can't give it to the buyer.
Right.
Or won't give it to the buyer. So at that point, you can say, this builder's offering additional compensation. Do you feel that I've worked hard for you? We've done this, we've done this, we've done this. So, are you okay amending this so that additional compensation, I can see the way
Sure.
it is.
Sure.
If on the representation agreement, on the part that says other, where we say, it says how much we're getting compensated. Let's just throw out 2%, can we put 2%? And buyer agrees to amend the offer if seller or builder is offering a higher fee.
It's big.
Probably, but I'm not gonna
That's
say
not it.
yes or no. I would have to, I wanna check with
Yeah,
you.
that's what I say, with that in the other line. It's kind of letting them know that if somebody's willing to pay more, that you're gonna be okay with amending this to say it's gonna go up to that amount.
It's like a min and max. Here's the minimum,
And they don't want, I know they don't want 2 different things on there.
right?
If you put the minimum on there,
No, I would say, I would be more inclined to put the max and have a conversation, call if we're in a situation where they're offering less, I will accept less, if that's what you're gonna do. You know what I
it's
mean?
easier to sell them on 1% than it is.
But you know what, but back when I was still selling, and if I were doing a listing of presentation, and I would tell them, if I end up getting the buyer, if, somebody comes and they're represented, and they're okay for me representing you, but me doing their paperwork, and I would even pay for an attorney to review their paperwork, instead of taking 6% at that time, because it's back, I can say 6%. What I'll do is I'll discount the portion of the commission that the buyer's agent would have got for you. I'm still gonna take some of it because I'm gonna be doing extra work on the buyer's behalf.
I said that gives me some incentive to do that. The other thing is that I'm to the point in my career, I guess to say, where I have a lot of sellers who are selling their house and buying another one. So I'm gonna sell your house for the full fee, but I'm gonna give you a big deal on the
Exactly.
buying side of it
Exactly.
because of that. So,
I mean, it's the same principle,
especially if,
and I did that all the
again, I'm
time
doing
back.
a lot of downsizing people and they're selling their big house, going to a smaller one. And that's why I think I can incentivize them a little bit to, now I'm not gonna incentivize them on the listing side like I usually do. Now I'm just gonna incentivize them on the buying side.
I love that you brought up your texting system. I used to use an IVR system, but it was a 1-800 number.
Yeah.
And as soon as they would call it, and each house had an extension, then I would get a ping on a text.
Yep, right.
If I knew how long the message lasted, and as soon as, and if I would end with, I'll call you shortly and follow up. Then you call them and say, this is Dale, would you like to see property? What questions do you have, kind of thing. I love
Website
that.
is agenttext.com, I think it is.
And it's $20 a month, that's cheap.
That's
So you
great.
get 5 different extensions, and if you want more, you get more, so you get sign it, things like that.
Jeff, you had a question?
I was going to just say, so with the buyer agreement, if you're concerned about the commission, you just make a buyer agreement for each house and show it, okay, find out what the commission is.
Good, what do you say?
But then you have to have them sign it before you go see the house, or do you have to?
No, before you show it.
Oh.
I think you can do one for each showing.
It all comes up to the conversation you have before you even start looking at houses.
You remember when we used to, consumer guy come out? That's the first guy, made that sign,
Right.
and everyone would go, oh my God! I was like, here's, let me explain to the super guy. Again, you know, the better your conversation and communication with your client, the stronger your relationship will be. And then by the time you get your compensating factor, they're gonna see the value, just explain the value.
And for those of you guys that buy internet leads, you know, a lot of times, obviously, you don't have a relationship with them
Yeah.
when you get that lead. So that's why Zillow came up with the touring agreement. So, you know, here's a thought for that. So you get an internet lead and you have the conversation. I don't want to meet you. I just want to go see that property. Well, first off, I have to have this completed before I show you that property. Now, you could have a strategy of, for this property, because you don't have a relationship and maybe it's harder to get them to sign that agreement. You could say, for this property, if you end up buying it, I'm gonna take 0, or I'm gonna take a flat fee. And then get in front of them and build that relationship during that property, because they're probably not gonna buy that property. Then at that point, have a conversation, we're gonna do the real, and have that agreement only be for one day. And if you like me, you wanna work with me, then do one that's the real deal, that's gonna say that you're gonna pay me this amount, the difference between what a seller would offer, et cetera.
We're GCR is looking at different documents to create to help us through this. And that's a touring agreement. I know some people already have them out there, but I think they need to be legal.
Well, I was gonna say that's what they said last week at the state level. They don't think the touring agreement is gonna fly long term. However, if you do a short-term agreement that is, and Jeff, that's a thought on her property. Or or if it's like a
Well,
Zillow.
if you're doing per property, you're probably gonna say, per property, I'm getting compensated. You're not doing it for free per property.
No,
No, so it's all in the conversation you have at first, so you explain to them.
Yeah.
If you wanna look at a house that has, and that is, the seller is not offering any compensation, then you're gonna be responsible to pay me that compensation. If you don't wanna do that, that's up to you. I can't tell them not to look at the house, but I can tell them that if they wanna see it, they're gonna have to pay, because the seller's not. Okay, so you wanna go see that house.
and how many properties are you showing in person in a day anyway? Probably just one, because our inventory is so low. But in the case where you might show 2 or 3 properties, or like the old days when you'd spend the whole day showing somebody 10 properties, that would be a little more difficult. However, I can see you doing that, but the big thing is building a relationship, showing your worth,
Right.
and then having a conversation around.
I buy Zillow leads and I don't show property without you.
You know, there's a safety element now. I think also if you're, instead of just saying, okay, you have to sign one document to show one house, you still want them to come in the office. And I think that's still the strongest relationship building you got. And you know, sometimes, like I said, you have to, earlier in a slide presentation, you have to know when to say no. You know, you have to know when to back out. So if somebody should say, oh, you know, you need to come show me, you need to come show me. I go, well, why do I need to come show you?
And mark my words, you're
You
gonna
need to
have
come into
people
the
out
office,
there
you need to come into the office.
discounting themselves all over the place. We've had it in different forms forever, like
Yeah.
back in the day of Help You Sell. Or some of the other discount brokers around. And we're gonna have that, and it's, again, showing, you get what you pay for, and this is what you get.
That actually brings up a good question. I was gonna ask somebody this. I was at a conference and talking to some people. One lady said you had homes to sell, and I go, yeah, they represent you. And they say, oh, no, I already have a broker. Or no, she said, I already know a broker, but they're a flat fee broker. They'll list my house, in the MLS and advertise and all that for like $1,000. Well, they had different packages, $1,000 for guys. And they had this huge checklist of all the things they do. And it looked like, you know, similar to what we would do, you know, advertising here, advertising there. So how do you compete against those? Like, if somebody's like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to do it for $1,000.
Yeah, you don't.
You're not competing.
But that's one where it's a limited representation, and again, that it states it even on there, if you see any of those ones, if you pull up any of those listings, it's a limited limitation. You're not showing the houses, they call the buyer directly, you're.
They call the seller directly.
And they're called seller directly, and it's amazing, I've seen so many of those, and they just.
They don't negotiate on their behalf,
They don't do
there's a
not.
lot limited.
It's MLS only. You set up the showing through the owner, you negotiate with the owner, everything is the owner, those MLS brokers.
Oh, so the owner takes on the responsibility
Yeah.
of setting up the appointments, so they just like, we'll put it up in the, I mean, yeah, I'll put.
They're taking $1,000 for entering it in the MLS as a marketing tool.
And they sit at home all day long, they don't even know where the house is at.
I thought there was more stuff to check with, like.
Depends on what you're going to be, they don't, you know.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, but but that's cool. Maybe I should just do that, just list properties in MLS.
No, we're not a discount broker.
But no, I know, I'm my business. I'm just joking. Like, I'm not, saying this is real estate agent.
Cindy, are you more confused now than you were earlier?
A big thing, a big stumbling block I have is I can remember reading myself, I would say in the recent past, but I don't know where the document was, where I read it. It was one of the things we get from NAR, OAR, CBR, one of those things, and then question answer. And it said, if the seller is paying a 0% buyer commission, that we still have to show it because there's an agreement with NAR and.
You do, it's an ethical, it's an ethics situation, you still have to show the property,
Even though
your
there's
buyer
a-
wants to see it. However, you can choose not to work with that buyer.
Correct.
So that, remember now, that conversation comes up before we even get in the car, before I even log in.
So if there is a 0% commission being paid to the buyer brokerage, to you, to the buyer brokerage, I still have to show it because of NAR.
Let's back up a second.
Yeah.
So let's say you, first off, you're gonna meet with your client, Cindy, and you're gonna sign your form, and you're gonna say, I charge X. Whatever percentage it is, or flat fee. So they know that that's your charge, and your conversation is going to be, so if here's what will happen. The seller may offer compensation and completely satisfy this, that could happen. And hopefully that will. Number two, the seller could satisfy part of it. And you, Mr. Buyer, are responsible for the rest of it. Or the seller may not satisfy any of it. At that point, you would be responsible for all of it. So you will need to make a decision as, and this is my agreement. Are you gonna work with me? Yes, you're gonna work with me, you're gonna sign. So if you show a 0% property at that point, then that person has already agreed with you that they're going to pay your compensation should a seller not.
You let them know before you show
Or you show the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they can agree not to.
Okay, all by-
And they can agree not to say, I don't wanna see it because I don't wanna have to come out.
Right, exactly.
By our contract, right? You gotta let them know.
I just.
Now, I mean, again, you gotta pick up that phone sometimes in that scenario. And you know, what happens if the seller says, you know what, my showings have been down, no one's looking at my house. And you're gonna go, well, you're not offering anybody has any interest in showing.
The
their home.
incentive.
If you want to change your compensating factor, what happens if the listing, if the seller says, okay, I changed my mind, but I never called that agent. I should still call that agent on a 0 compensation factor and let them know that this is the agreement that I have. Is your client's position still firm that they will not compensate anything?
And then I can say to them, because of that, I'm not going to show it. No, I can't say that.
No, you're not, no, because you already have an agreement with
You
your
already
buyer.
have your terms and conditions of your business model.
It just stinks.
So I don't think it's gonna be as difficult as what you think it will be. If you have that conversation, setting the expectation up front, one of these three things will happen. Seller's gonna pay my compensation. Seller's only gonna pay part of my compensation, then therefore buyer, you're responsible for the other portion. Or third, the seller offers nothing and you're responsible for all of it. And that's how it will work, and I will let you know if compensation is offered or not, and you may choose whether or not you wanna see that property.
Now, even if they are offering 1% or 0% or 2%, whatever, we can still say, hey, you know, we can put an offer on this property and then we'll.
You can ask for it.
Yeah, ask for, from what I've told from previous brokers, you can't include it with the offer, it has to be separate.
Well, it can be right in your contract, in your offer.
In the contract,
Yep.
okay, because they said that means that the acceptance of it is dependent on your commission or something.
It's just part of the agreement. It's not, it doesn't say contingent upon, but it's part of the agreement.
Okay, so you just submit with the different conditions, you know, sell or
So
compensate.
we are working on a separate document that can go with it. I mean, that's something that we're looking at. We don't have anything yet.
Okay.
Something that came up last week during our office meeting, which I thought was really interesting, is Kathy Cairo brought it up, and then Jensen kind of chimed in. And so Kathy said, it's just what we were talking about here with what's in it, if they're offering zero compensation. And Kathy says, can I ask my buyer if they want to see the property? Absolutely. I mean, they need to know, you know, what everything is and disclose. And if they say they don't want to see it, that's fine. So Kathy goes, how do you get the message back to that seller so that they understand that they're making such a small pool of people available for that property? And Jensen said, why don't you call showing time? Yeah. Schedule the showing, and then if your buyer says they don't want to see it, cancel the showing, and then the response say, buyer chose not to see this property because there was no compensation offered to the buyer's broker. I thought pretty good.
And you're not, I don't think you're gonna be unethical. First of all, you're telling the client by signing this buyer's, if you're gonna take this conversation out of regardless.
Right.
You are responsible for paying this compensation that the buyer worked agreement is doing. We're hoping to find someone who we can get that compensation from other sources, but ultimately go to. Just compensate, listen, we want to lose this out this way, we're not offering any buyer's compensation to pay the point. I think that's what we get, so say we go to the house, it does feel like a short house, right? It's neat to do. But these are the three potential scenarios, right? And then to his point, you can write in the contract, if you say we want to make an offer, I think here's what the offer, but here's what you have, here's what I tell us what to do. Here's what we're going to do on our buy side of the. And my buyer want to do this, but you have to get over to your right compensation contract. Right, and they can accept it or decline.
And you know, here's the thing, I mean, for years, if you have somebody a buyer that doesn't have a lot of money for their closing costs, for there's lots of things the buyer has to pay, closing costs, inspections. Maybe we're buying down points on, you know, all those kinds of things. You can still, if there's zero compensation offered to a buyer broker by the listing or the seller, you can still ask for closing costs on behalf of your buyer. And that helps cover that piece of it, and then the buyer can still pay you the compensation for you working through the deal.
So we'll have to have alternative classes on how to structure purchase contracts
Correct.
under these different types of scenarios. And this is absolutely going to be a scenario that will be coming down the pipe. If the average cost of a house today is $360,000, and you know, that's a true scenario. So we're gonna have classes on negotiating, we're gonna have classes on maybe create a drop-down menu. We're gonna have documents created for commission alterations and stuff like that. But right now, what we do have is this buyer's agency agreement. I was by the way, this is the exclusive buyer's agency agreement. And we will probably have a non-exclusive buyer's agency agreement that might address Jeff's comments about how to show homes non-exclusively. That could be on the table too. So there's document creation that we're looking at. We got a series of documents from Kimberly Sherrod from Florida. She's licensed in Florida. We're looking at those to see how we could maybe implement some of those commission documents that Florida is already using. So, I mean, we're not done yet. We're just beginning.
It will be a work in progress for a while, but this is the first piece of it, and it's a requirement as it dropped it.
And all agents are running by, this is not just the.
Right,
No.
all agents effective August 17th. We're putting in like July 1st, so people can begin getting used to it.
Florida's already doing this.
Well,
New York is already doing this. California's already doing it.
and here's the thing, a lot of brokerages instituted this earlier this year in preparation for that. We didn't do it because we didn't want to say, okay, you're required to use this document, and then we're gonna change it all July or whenever it was done.
But you're saying we need to have this conversation. If somebody calls and wants to see your listing, you have to have this conversation, get it signed before you show it to them.
Not if it's your list.
Not if it's your listing.
That's a good point, Jeff. If it's your listing, they're not your client.
Okay, so
Sellers.
any buyer, if somebody I've worked with before says, hey, I want to see this house, this has to be signed.
Yeah. And the drop dead dates nationally is August 17th. We're instituting it July 1st, just so everybody can get accustomed to it.
And remember that the listing agent probably does not want to list a property with no compensation.
Yeah.
And you probably don't, it was probably their seller's idea, and they didn't know how to have the conversation with them to change it. So call that agent, and find out how you can work it out to put the deal together. Don't just assume that you can't make it work, right? Because you can make it work. There's always a way to make it work. You can offer over asking and then have it come back as commission. You know, a seller concession. There's a lot of things, especially if the house has been sitting for a while.
I mean, 100% relationship business, stuff like that. If we're calling other agents, that's why anybody says, oh, I don't want to have to call all these agents. Anytime I have somebody who says, show my property or anything else, I take every bit of their information, email address, phone call, whatever else, I'm texting them, I'm calling them, whatever else. It's relationship business, because if there's 5 offers in front of them and it's, now I'm one of those 5, and I had great conversation with this person, you know what, they're gonna start, hey, you know, he's got a really solid, you know, his lender, that Bill guy, he's really harassing people, which is great, he's always fun to be, you know, he's already did this, and those are the things. Sometimes it's the difference of the price. At a house in winter contractor we were a lower offer, but we were the best.
Well, your goal is to win the deal for your buyer, number one. And then secondly, I don't know about you, but I'd much rather talk to them, figure out what they want, write the contract the way it needs to be to begin with, instead of having 10 counters going back. And trying to follow that, okay?
Well, what also happened is that we talked, well, I'm just gonna text Dale, what's your commission on this thing? And he's like, wait a second. Who is this? I don't know this number. Now I'm going, are you a realtor? Or are you?
Buyer or seller, whatever.
Like, well, who are you?
So I just.
So at the end of the day, you have to pick up the phone and call the number, saying, well, who are you? I don't know who you are. Are you just gonna blatantly give away this information?
Right. So a month ago, I was in a CE class, and obviously this is a topic that's bubbling everywhere. And the discussion was that the state of Washington implemented this whole thing 2 years ago. So I don't know if we have any affiliates out there that can give us some information on how they're dealing with some.
Columbus Realtor said they've been following them this whole time.
Okay,
Did they have a girl in from Washington? At one of the broker meetings? They had somebody in from West Coast.
I mean, New
I
York's
think
been
it
doing
was
this for years,
Washington.
Texas has been doing this for years, Washington. I mean, a lot of different states have already been doing this, and they're surviving just fine. We're gonna be fine too. But I think that they did think specifically the meeting, I was in 2 meetings back, but the one that said that they've been following everything that's going on. And
Does anyone on the panel have any questions?
all the conversations too are that agents are having conversations or sellers right now. Sellers are saying, yes, I want to offer compensation to a buyer's agent because I see their value from what you just told me. That they vet the buyer, that it's gonna be a good transaction, it's gonna be all of the things.
yeah, I understand the selling point of that side, and I'm sure we'll all now navigate through that. I guess my biggest concern are new buyers coming to the table. They can barely squeak in there.
Yeah.
And to have them sign, and I'm okay, I am gonna have to be okay with this, I'm going to have them sign this. And if they don't wanna sign it, they're gonna find someone lower. I'm just saying, someone who say, hey, I'll do it for $1,000.
They will. I've already seen agents in other states that we're working with that have a tier. If I sell you a property within the first 1 to 5 homes we see, I get paid X. If it's 6 to 10 X. But here's what I'll tell you, being somewhat of an outsider, I'm not an agent, right? I'm just dealing with buyers all the time. If you're that agent that's just gonna scoop up everybody for 1%, your reputation is gonna be shit in this town. And reputation and relationships, as Casey said, are very important. Same thing on the listing side. If you're the listing agent that's gonna do, hey, I'm gonna get mine and you go for yourself, Well, over a period of time, when we get together at, happy hours and other meetings and this local associations, you're not gonna be able to show your face, so it's,
So the other piece,
it's gonna be, I think you guys have about 30 hard days. And you guys get to jump on it, you're gonna be ready by the 17th. Because when everybody gets a phone call and everybody has to say, well, I'd love to show you 123 Main Street, but I have an agreement you need to sign. How are you gonna explain that? This is because the lawsuit? I would probably stay away from that. I would say there's a recent change in the regulations for selling real estate in Central Ohio.
Right.
And now, in order for me to even be able to open a door, we need to talk about buyer's compensation. I have an agreement I'm gonna need to go over with you. I would also, again, just as an outsider, I think buyer's consultations they're gonna come back. And really successful agents are gonna do that. If someone's not willing to come in and spend 30 minutes to an hour with you for you to get to know their goals, what they're looking for in a property, they're probably wasting your freaking time.
but I honestly, the technology that's available out there, no one is going to waste their time sitting down with it. I just think this generation, they want to move forward, they want to do it quickly. I think
It'll be on the
that's-
hood of a car.
Right, and so I think there's two things are gonna happen, and we're gonna see. People are gonna post-date this. I think they're gonna print it out and say, when we get close to closing, you're gonna have to sign this piece of paper, because now we know what the rules are. They're gonna print it out, and agents are gonna have to post-date it. That's,
As
that's.
soon as they did that.
Yeah.
As soon as they did that, they're in violation.
But it'll be
I know, but
written-
I'm just saying, and somebody's gotta do
That's
that.
saying they're gonna do
You're
it.
on the risk of.
And one thing about your.
Remember when I started, I had 5 things that agents violate, there's now 6.
I mean, they're gonna be very creative about that. The other thing is if the buyer comes to the table and say, shit, I can't pay you guys. Now what? Are we going to sue? Now we have a legal binding contract that they were gonna pay our broker 3%.
Actually, the board is chomping on a bit right now. I can't wait to represent buyers.
Right, but I'm just asking, is that where we're headed to? Because
That's why you wanna have a buyer consultation. You wanna say before we go out, here's the reason why we're gonna do it. And I'm Bill, I call Bill on a Saturday, Bill, I'm sitting here in the office and I wanna introduce somebody. Bill pick up his phone.
Well,
And my daughter's 23. You said this younger generation. My daughter worked with a KW agent. Now she's a very experienced agent. I think most recently, she's like number 2 in state. She didn't give my daughter an option. Like my daughter called her, said, hey, my dad said to give you a call, heard you're a great agent. I'm first time home where I want to buy. She said, great, I have Thursday at 2 and Friday at 10 a.m. My office is in Florence, Kentucky, blank, blank, blank. What's working best for you?
Right,
But it's like,
I get it.
you'll get through it.
and you're always gonna have people that are never gonna be ethical, or they're never gonna do what they need to be compliant. You know, I think a lot of people are gonna leave themselves out in one way, shape, or form. I think it's gonna matter more than ever who you do business with, meaning reliable partners in the business. I think it's gonna having good relationships with other agents, I'll never forget, my mother-in-law 35 years ago told me, you can attract more flies with honey than you do vinegar. And I've seen agents get really, excuse my French, pissy with other agents on the phone over things that they shouldn't. You're so much better, you both are trying to get to the same solution.
Win.
Exactly, so it's like, you know what, I'm trying to help my buyer because they want this house, you're trying to help your seller because they want this house. How can we work together to make this happen? Let's put our heads together. And I think it's gonna be more of that that's needed than ever before.
I don't think it's.
I don't think if you're not getting these signed up front, you're gonna lose any.
Yeah.
You're gonna spend 2 or 3 times and all this post dated, and then what's gonna happen, they're gonna bail on you.
I'm not gonna want to.
Thanks for trying.
I think Shaw's saying.
Well, we're not sitting, we're not,
We don't know.
actually, Dayla's having a class tomorrow, at 10:30.
And
Dayla's doing this class tomorrow.
I don't know, that agent, like, send out 3 top questions, like, boil it down to the top. One question. Yes, because some of it, I mean, honestly, I know it's,
Well, we can put together a mastermind here and then that's.
yeah.
I want to be doing it in the top
Scripts, that's what.
and I have Rachel do that for the middle too.
For mastermind on buyer's agency agreement,
Yeah.
that's perfect, yeah.
I think we're gonna, especially even as it evolves, we're gonna have different tactics, like, you know, Kristen's gonna do something, she's going, hey, this is what's working for me, and then you're gonna hear, you know, Danny, hey, this is what's working for me, and Mary, that's what's working for me. And then you learn, just think of all the tactics that we've applied to our contracts and businesses through the years already. You know, we get, that's why the fact that we have collaboration, we talk to each other is important. So it's even more important to see all of your beautiful faces in the office even more.
And that's, yeah.
They're out showing.
houses. Well, I appreciate everyone. We had a good turnout today. Thank you. I'm sure we just have a lot to think about. We gotta put together our value proposition.
Yeah. So the value.
Oh, yeah, everybody's just original.
Yeah, we know the stories that remind. Stories out there over there. I think I'm not thinking here about the conversation. We're working in the best interest of your client. Yeah, the dollars out there, but it's take it by and then you're.
Homeowners are gonna talk. What you do with this new.
And I documented on show.
It'll work itself out.
And I documented with.
Rachel, real quick. Do you have a second to do that? Or at least get- I've got it, you guys, whatever.
Yes, I, exactly.
I was telling, what's my, I'm your fiduciary.
And I didn't give you 110%, all I'm asking you. I gotta hear.
I have someone who signed it, and I have you. You both want to look at the same house, I can't show you the house. Want this out?
There's 2 things that will happen. This is, if we can't get this value proposition down. Learn our value proposition, try to maintain our 3% base. Agents are gonna work, they're gonna have to work 30% harder to make the same amount of money, because you've lost a third of your income. And the other thing is, company wide, I think our average. So. I think it's 367 for our sale. Average sale.
363 or 368 for dividends.
I have a cheap business rate. Because I got 8% commission on my.
But the other thing I'm looking at is our overall 2.7%. And if our agents can maintain that, then the overall company value, our volume will, GCI will go down.
Yeah, we've done this bill. I'm really, it'll be interesting to watch. The agents that are out there in the field do the work are going to be just fine. It's going to be an issue. Just fine. Yes and no. Yeah, yes and no. We are the ones that are not right. They do help our lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Business.
Thanks, still on.
Good to see you, Jim.